Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Peter, and I help direct the events here at Strand. For a little bit of history, Strand was founded in 1927 by the Bass family over on what was then 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled until after over 91 years, Strand is the sole survivor still run by the Bass family and still housing new and used books. Tonight we are very excited to have with us Kate T. Parker to discuss The Heart of a Boy, her brand new collection of photography celebrating boyhood in all its forms. It follows her Strong is the New Pretty photo series and best-selling book, which led to collaborations with brands such as Disney, Athleta, Kellogg's, and NBC, as well as partnerships with organizations such as Girls on the Run, Girl Up, the Arthur Blank Family Foundation, Glam for Good, and the Bully Project by investing in children's health and education. Kate's work has also been featured in a wide variety of publications, including the Huffington Post, O Magazine, Vogue, Good Morning America, CNN, and many more. Joining her to discuss the book is Strand Events alum Michael Ian Black, star of numerous films and TV series, writer and director of several films, and world-traveling comedian. He's also the author of 11 books, most recently his children's book, I'm Sad, and his own poignant rethinking of masculinity, A Better Man, A Letter to My Son, which is due out next Father's Day. Also here to moderate their discussion is another returning events guest, podcaster, writer, and musician, Boyce Terrell Allen. His books include 2 novels, a novel/story collection, and a collection of writings from Multicultural Voices. Boyce has received grants and scholarships from the Multicultural Arts Initiative, the Pittsburgh Foundation, and the Archie D. and Bertha H. Walker Foundation. He's also the host of the podcast Talk Music Talk, for which we've been honored to host several live podcasts and performances. I couldn't be more thrilled to hear all about Kate's deeply felt celebration of boyhood, so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Boyce, Michael, and Kate to the Strand.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Thank you guys for coming.
Hi. I'm Michael. That's our star, Kate.
I'm Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Yes.
So, Kate, we are here tonight for the book, The Heart of a Boy. But this all started with Strong is the New Pretty, the project. Can you talk about that first?
Sure. So Strong is the New Pretty started for me. I have 2 girls. I'm a mom, and I just started taking pictures of my girls. And it's funny because I was not shooting anything specifically. I was just shooting them as they are, and they are, and still they were, and they still are, just like dirty and messy. And we live in Atlanta, where a lot of little girls you see of, bows and dresses and perfect smiles.
Yeah.
And my girls were not that. So I didn't want them to think that they had to be that. So I started specifically shooting more and more to celebrate them for who they were. And the project sort of organically grew and grew over a number of years. And it's kind of funny because I was asked to be part of a gallery show in Atlanta.
Yes.
And not like one single image sold in that show. And
Were you crestfallen?
I was, but then I got pissed because I have a little bit of a temper, and I sent it out. I sent the pictures out to a couple blogs that I followed, and then it went kind of everywhere. It went viral, and then that's when the opportunity to do a book came from that.
Okay. So from the book, from being the mother of 2 girls, and then to do a book about boys, did you feel in any way like, hey, do I have the right to do a book on boys?
No, I didn't.
Why a book on boys?
I didn't want to at all. So Megan, my lovely editor. So every shoot I would do, every talk I would do for Strong is the New Pretty, little boys or moms of boys or teachers or coaches would say, like, oh, when is your book about boys?
Yeah.
Are you going to do a book about boys? And I was like, no, they don't need it. They're fine. And then Megan asked me the same question. And I was like, all right, well, I can try. I can just try, like, kind of just trying to be nice and play nice. And then come back and say, oh, it didn't work. There's no need. But the second that I started to shoot it and to research it, I realized that, like, so I don't have boys. And I don't spend a lot of quality time with boys.
Okay.
So I realized I was so wrong, and there was so much more to these boys' stories. They were not really that, what I thought of boys was that, which is what the typical thought is, that like they're athletes, they're not emotional, they're leaders, and there's not much below the surface.
Yeah.
And I was so wrong. So I really started to take the project on with like a lot of the same passion that I did with Strong and the New Pretty.
So in some ways, I feel like you were learning more about boys in this process.
For sure, yeah. I really thought that I was worried about abandoning our girls, and I was worried that there wasn't anything there. I thought their voices were heard. I thought that they didn't need this.
Okay.
But I realized that the boxes of like, you put around a little girl, you have to look this way or you have to act this way. It's smaller even for our boys. Like it is a smaller box that we put around our boys than our girls.
And Michael, you have a book you're working on now that is in the same category?
It is about the same topic, but without any of the great photographs from Kate. It's called A Better Man. I think the subtitle that we settled on is A Mostly Serious Letter to My Son. And my son's leaving for college this fall, and the book is addressed to him, and it's about how to move into the world as a man and what that means to me and what I have discovered about that. And and as Kate also discovered, it's a vast, complicated, and under-discussed topic.
When did you discover that for yourself in terms of how masculinity can be broader and not be toxic?
I discovered it for myself probably, no joke, when I was in my 40s. Not that I didn't personally believe that my masculinity was broader than I had been exposed to as a younger person. I believed that about myself, but I didn't quite understand that it was a topic that had a larger cultural resonance, that it could have a larger cultural resonance, that other people were struggling with this. So it took me a long time to even understand myself.
Okay. So as both, I'm not a parent, but for parents, how do you pass that on to your kids? Like that there's a new way the girls can be strong and that a boy can be sensitive.
I just beat my kids.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Applause for beating.
I mean, for me, it's just not putting labels on it and not saying, a lot of the time it's just saying, like if they come to me with an idea or a thought or that's something they want to try, it's just saying, sure. Like not if they, oh, it's piano and you're doing whatever. Like if it's something that is not typically gendered or whatever for girls, then I just think that never putting a doubt in their mind that they are capable or that they are, for girls, that they're capable or that they could try something, and just always checking myself and making sure that whatever language I'm using is not putting an idea into their head that girls do this or girls can't do that or things like that. It's always just, and also it's like for me it's so much education on constantly when they are on social media is like, that's not real. That's Photoshop. She had a nose job. She had a boob job. Like just making sure that all of these things that they see, they understand are not real and that not even attainable.
Yeah, and to not judge themselves.
Exactly.
To that standard. And besides beatings, what have you found works?
Well, I've got a son and I've got a daughter, and I think it's probably naive for me to say that I approached parenting them the same way, although I tried. For me, what I've been trying to do as a parent from the beginning isn't so much, it's basically what Kate said. I'm trying to model behavior that I think will be helpful for them. So maybe my son and my daughter need different things and they're exposed to different modeling as a result of that, or they're taking modeling as a result of that. So my son tends to be a little bit more retiring and passive, and I think he needs to see, at times, confidence and aggression. My daughter is the confident, aggressive one, and sometimes she's the one that needs to see empathy and compassion. When we talk about boys and girls, there are obvious stereotypes that we all sort of bring to mind. But those stereotypes are exactly that, and they are stereotypes for a reason. On average, boys may be more of one thing than girls, but that's just an average. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, some of the characteristics that are typically associated with boys I see in my girl, and vice versa. And then some of the ones I find in my boy.
So this is what I was wondering. As parents, you say you raise your kids that, he's going to be strong, he's going to be sensitive, and then you send them out into a world where other parents may not necessarily be doing that. Like, how do you balance that with what you're doing and them going out into the world and maybe practicing what you're preaching?
Well, I think if you give them enough of a foundation and you give them that confidence, like, my daughter came home the other day and she was like, Mom, one of my girlfriends is grounded, and she's grounded because her weight. And Ella was like appalled. Yeah. And she goes, I don't like her mom. And I was like, I was shocked by that. Yeah. But like the fact that she was shocked by that felt really badly for her friend. And she goes, she's not even heavy. And it was just this interesting thing about how she felt so much outrage for her friend for kind of getting put into this horrible box of by her mom. I think it's as much as we can to lay that foundation and keep it as strong as possible, and just constantly reiterating what our values are and what we hope their values are, that when they go out, they're not shaken as much.
What about for you, Michael?
I don't think there is anything I can do as a parent that is going to prepare them for the world outside of what I can control as a parent. I think there's 3 levels of influence that kids are exposed to. The first is the modeling that they see at home, and I think that is the most important. It is their formative modeling. It's the thing that they're exposed to earliest and most often, and hopefully, as Kate said, sets a foundation for them. Then when you take a step out of that, the next ring is their peers, and that is really powerful also. And they will learn a lot of shit from their peers that you may approve of and you may disapprove of. And then finally is the kind of cultural circle of influence that we all experience. So that's movies and TVs and TVs. If you have more than one TV, it's TVs. Okay. Movies and TV and books and whatever. I feel like I can control what I can control, which is kind of the world inside the walls of our home. And hopefully, as Kate said, that prepares them and sets them up for success when they get out. But I don't kid myself into thinking that I can control that.
Okay. And what would be your definition for strong and sensitive? What would your definitions be? How do you look at those words?
Oh, well, I think they're different. But for strong to me is just knowing who you are and being proud of that, and not being afraid to be who you are despite ridicule, despite disapproval. And then, sensitive. I think sensitive is probably a very similar definition. It's it's all I feel like the message of my work, the message of Heart of a Boy and Strong as New Pretty is exactly the same message. Okay. Trying to instill the sense of who you are at your core is okay. And it's better than okay. It's something we need to celebrate.
Okay. Did you have different approaches shooting for the first book as opposed to the second one?
No. I did exactly the same way. I had sort of a process in place with Strong as New Pretty. It worked. Okay. And then just did the same thing for Heart of a Boy. It was actually a much faster shoot.
Okay. What was the process?
So I travel. I'm a commercial photographer, so I'll travel for commercial photography. And so generally I'll tack on a day wherever I'm going, or if I'm coming here to see my publisher or anything like that, I will put a call out on social media. Say, if it's LA, I'll look for surfers or skaters, something specific to that. Or just general, looking for interesting, strong girls, or looking for amazing boys. And then I get a bunch of, replies, and I weed through them and try to schedule the shoots and get as much done as I can while I'm on the road. And then a bunch of the harder things to schedule, that it's more if it's an event or a spelling bee or something that I need to go to. I generally do that in Atlanta. Okay. Because it's just easier than to recreate an event. I'll go to it.
Okay. And how do you know what you're looking for in a photo? Because you're shooting far more than what ends up in a book. How do you know what works and what is there something specific you're looking for?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I made an Excel document of like all of the for this book, all of the kinds of boys I wanted to shoot. But then that gets totally changed by what they send me, because I can't think of anything. And also it's very like biased on what I think is interesting or what I think is what a boy would do. So like when I get like boys, my son is like a regional championship in Rubik's Cube. I didn't think of that. That's awesome though. So I prefer when like my ideas get put aside for actuality of like what these boys are actually doing.
Okay. And how did you decide? The book is divided into chapters of the heart, of joyfulness.
Yeah, the heart is, what do we have on Megan?
The heart is joyful, curious,
vulnerable, kind,
resilient.
Yeah.
Sleepy is one of them, maybe.
But we had a list of like, I don't even know, we had a list of like 30 words. And then this is like one of my favorite parts of the process is like we took the words and we put them up all around the office at Workman, and then we had tons of pictures, and then we just started tacking up which goes with which, and then we kind of figure, okay, well these words sort of work best, and then we narrow it down that way. Yeah.
Okay. And Michael, for your book, why did you decide to?
Because the last several years of my professional life, I have been actively seeking one of two things. Either a project that makes me kind of uncomfortable, or a project that makes me a lot of money.
Okay.
This was the first. I had written a op-ed for the New York Times after the Parkland shooting. I didn't even know that I wanted to do that, but I sort of felt like I just sort of felt compelled to, because I was making the obvious point that the shooters in all of these crimes are boys, and it is an under-discussed aspect of that phenomena. And from there, I was approached to write a book by Kate, same publisher, and resisted it for a while because I felt like, A, who am I to talk about this? I'm not an academic. I don't have training in this. All I am is a dad. And I also felt like if I move into this space, it could end up defining me in some ways. And I had to ask myself, am I okay with that? Am I okay with moving into a kind of work that is very different from the work that if I'm known at all, known for? And can I live in that comfortably? The answer to that question was, yes, I can move into it. I don't know that I don't know that I can live in it comfortably. I'm not that comfortable with it even now, as I'm most of the way through this book. But I also felt like, answer to the first question, who am I? I'm all I am as a dad. In a certain way, the more I wrestled with it, the more that felt like enough. If I can focus this on my son and me and my dad, and then combine that with whatever I've learned on this journey, that might be enough. And it's been really rewarding. It's been incredibly hard and frustrating and bewildering at times. And I have contradicted myself almost every day on this topic. But it's been a really worthwhile journey for me to this point.
What has been the most difficult in wanting to say what you want to say in an eloquent way, or how it's going to be perceived?
Oh, everything. Everything is hard. It's hard to even. The premise itself was hard to wrap your head around. Just learning for myself, what is masculinity? What does it mean to be a man? Like, how do we think of that? Just answering that simple question, I feel like took months of my life. Okay. It's a very complicated topic. And the research that I did has been really illuminating. The most surprising thing to me as I've gone through this process is my own opinion about the topic has shifted somewhat, where I came into it probably as a kind of, from a kind of typically progressive/liberal point of view, which is that, boys need to change, boys are messed up, blah, 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 blah. I've since come to feel differently about it. And I feel like there are aspects, a lot of aspects of what a lot of people call traditional masculinity that are worth fighting for and worth preserving. That there is a hard kernel, a nub of masculinity that is incredibly powerful, vibrant, exciting, life-affirming. But it just needs to be complemented with a lot of other stuff.
Okay.
And if we can do that, well, I think we're going to go a long way to helping our boys and men.
Okay. And what definition of masculinity did you
In the
decide
end,
upon?
I landed on masculinity as no more than a language. It is a language that we use, a verbal and nonverbal language, to establish dominance between men. And it's really no more or less than that. But that is a lot. That language informs everything that men do. From the way I'm sitting, the clothes that I wear, the way I speak, the way I gesticulate, or not. Every aspect of a man's life is so coded. And by the time we're 3, 4, 5 years old, 6 years old, boys have learned that language pretty fluently. They learn it as they learn their native tongue. And we bring all of that with us into our boyhood and then into our manhood. And if we never stop to examine that language, why we live that language, and why that language has such a powerful impact on us, then there's a chance that we become kind of cocooned within it and stifled from it. It can feel like walls closing in. And I think a lot of boys and men understand that suffocating feeling of their own masculinity.
Okay. And it's a letter to your son.
It is a letter to my son.
Was there any advice that you found the most important advice you could give to him?
No, he hasn't read it yet. And so I'm going to wait for him to tell me what, if anything, is resonating for him.
Okay.
He's 18. He's not going to, he doesn't care what I have to say.
And for both of you, what would you say that a girl can get from masculinity and a boy can get from being more feminine or approaching that language?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one. I think for me, at least the message from my books and with the images that I put out there, it's trying to not put those labels and those boxes on girls or boys, just that who you are, whatever that looks like, whatever that is, if it's masculine or feminine, regardless of your gender, is enough. And that trying not to have kids change who they are to fit in. That's really what that's what I want to show with these images. That your core is good and that your core shouldn't have to change, and that a masculine girl is great, a feminine boy is great, and that trying to shame into sort of fitting into expectations is not helpful, and it's harmful, and trying to kind of move away from that.
Okay. Michael?
Can you repeat the question?
What do you think that we can get, little boys can gain from being a part of their femininity and girls for masculinity?
I kind of agree, I think I largely agree with Kate, that, well, for boys, it's the conversation is different than it was, let's say, 50 years ago. When girls were expected, both boys and girls were expected to comport to very specific types. That has since changed for girls in an incredible way. The idea of of a girl leaning into her strength, however you want to find it, her leadership, however you her independence, her self-reliance, all of that is being celebrated in a way that it never was before. So we don't necessarily even think of those as masculine traits anymore. But boys are not necessarily encouraged to lean into their vulnerability. They're not, or even necessarily, let's say, their creativity, their self-expression, their emotional intelligence. Boys aren't encouraged to lean into that stuff, which are still considered more feminine traits, than girls are encouraged to lean into what were more masculine traits. So I guess what I'm looking for is for that same conversation that happened around girls to begin around boys. And it is beginning. Yeah. It's slow, but it is beginning.
Okay. And who do you think your audience is for or do you want your audience to be for the book?
Well, everybody, right? Yeah. No, I think it kind of spans a lot of ages for both books. I think, even if you're not reading, kids look at the pictures, they can see the ages of the boys. I know somebody said that to me yesterday that her 5-year-old isn't reading, but he really is very interested in what these boys are doing and their ages. Because I think it's like, he's 9?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I can do that. I can maybe try that at, just like different things. So I think I don't know. I think it's very open. I think it's I know women give it to, like Strong and Pretty, they give it to other women if they're going through something tough. So I think it's definitely, we aim the books not necessarily at kids, but at parents. So
that's kind of where it starts, with the parents and educators, bring it down to the kids. Was there anything that you didn't realize until you went out and promoting the book that you discovered about these images and how people connected to them?
Just that kids are, I got another text the other day, this little boy, he calls it the Heart of a Boy his journey book, and he brings it with him everywhere. Yeah. And the mom sent a picture of him and his eye doctor. So I feel like there's so few things out there that is encouraging boys to embrace their sensitive side or to be who they are. And like Michael said, there's so much for girls, and we're so much farther along in that conversation. So just realizing how much of a hole there is for boys, that I feel really proud and very thankful to be, even though I was reluctant, to be able to have something that we can give them, and that they seem to be holding on to.
Okay. And what else do you think needs to happen for that conversation for boys?
It's hard for me to say. I know that these things happen in pinpricks. There's a heavy black cloth, and there's a pinprick and a pinprick and a pinprick, and light starts to shine through. And so Kate's book is a pinprick. I hope my book is one. And then eventually, you start to see a lot more light. That's for me personally, that's my only goal, is just to be that little pinprick.
Okay. And what's next for you? When's the book coming out? Do you know?
Father's Day of 2020.
Okay, great. And are you working on anything? Is it too soon?
No, I am. I'm working on something right now. I'm working on a book about courage. Okay. And girls and women. So similar in look and feel. It's a photography book, but also just sort of exploring that, that fear, but then you're doing it anyway, that bravery and courage, and also not just working with kids, but working with women this time. I'm excited about that.
Okay. Did you feel that braveness and courage when you had not sold anything and then you just decide, I'm going to put it out on the internet?
I mean, maybe my courage comes through as anger because I was more, No, I think so. I mean, I am so comfortable behind the camera. I don't like traveling on the planes. I don't like talking in front of groups of people, but I have to do
for now.
I would never put myself sort of in the center of, but the message is really important to me, and I literally have avoided public speaking my entire life.
Okay.
And I find myself doing it multiple times a day now, so I feel like it's.
You're very good at it. Yeah.
Thank you.
She's good at it, right?
Yeah, you would have.
Compelling speaker.
But it's funny because it's I don't think kids recognize, that's why I wanted to include an older generation. I don't think kids recognize that adults get scared, and that also just trying to show that, like, we get scared, but we do it anyway. You get scared, you do it anyway, and that sort of kind of pushing against those things that hold you back is the goal for the next one.
Okay, sounds good. And I think we are going to open it up to questions from the audience.
If you want to raise your hand, I'll bring you a mic. Very brave, going first.
Hi, Kate. We exchanged a few messages on Instagram a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, when you first wrote Strong is the New Pretty for my daughter. And I thought that was very, first of all, I'm sorry, we're shifting on girls real quick. But I thought that book was really inspiring. And I came to just like support and see you. But I have a question. Are you going to make a journal for these books for kids as well?
The Strongest New Pretty has a journal.
Okay.
It's called Strongest New Pretty, the journal.
I'm going to get it.
It's pretty.
There you go.
It's a hard name to remember.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I don't know I don't know what our plans are for the boys.
Okay, so I'm going to get mine.
Yes. I love that making the journal was so much fun. And it basically takes all the ideas and about trying to get girls to, use their voices and find their voices and be confident and put themselves out there and try new things. And it has a daily prompt for the girls to do, and it's got pictures from the book in there.
I love that.
Yeah.
When I first got the first one, I don't think she was able to read that much words yet, and now she could. And so we're going to get the journal. And I just want to say you're phenomenal on and offline, okay?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
One in the middle.
When do you think you're going to publish your next book?
Yeah, my editor and publisher are here. They probably know better than I do. I would say 2 years, a year. I feel like people might be sick of me, so I don't know. Fall 2020. You can see how into the details I am. I don't know.
Do you write? Do you take pictures?
Did I email with you? I thought so. She emailed me, and I was like, I'm shooting for my Courage book. So I'm going to take her picture after.
Cool.
Thanks
Any
for
other
coming.
questions?
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. What was the biggest thing you feel like you learned about yourself as a parent after spending this much time as a mother of daughters? What did you learn about yourself as a parent after spending so much time with all the boys?
I was kind of ashamed of myself that I was for years, I'd shut it down. I was like, no, boys are fine. Boys are fine. And as somebody that is aware and empathetic, that I never once thought that this was necessary or that it was a worthwhile, I had to kind of check myself and be like, well, what else am I not? What else am I sort of just assuming is fine? That just in a different way, I had no idea I shot Jules, their son, and he is an amazing and colorful and super feeling and so smart kid, but at the surface, which I would have normally taken him, I would have been like, well, what sport do you play? And just kind of those things about myself who's fairly aware. I just kind of checking myself and my own sort of prejudices. I'm very glad I had the chance to open my eyes and recognizing kind of in other areas of my life that that's necessary.
Any other questions?
I guess I could have asked you this separately, but in hearing you both talk, it's hard not to think about the fact that the last presidential election amped up the conversation about the necessity of women being strong and really led to a rebirth of a movement that those of us old enough to remember did before. I'm just curious whether or not either of you thinks there needs to be the same large political moment to amp up the conversation about boys and masculinity, or whether it will just come, as Michael said, through the pinpricks.
I feel like it's so complicated because there's so much. If you push the boys forward, then what about the girls? Are we overshadowing our girl? I feel like it's such a tricky and like dicey, like I think that's why it hasn't started as much, because it's so fraught with like this meaning of, are we taking away from our girls who have made this progress if we try to bring our boys along? I think we haven't framed it correctly yet. And I'm sure Michael's book will frame it perfectly and will be the impetus for this new movement. No, I think I think it's necessary, but I just don't know. I mean, for lack of a better word, how do you brand that? You know, because it's really complicated.
It is complicated. Part of it, for I think exactly the reasons that you said. Part of it is a cultural bias within men. To admit that we need help is actually admitting we need help is so counterintuitive for men to begin with. We're so part of our masculinity is not admitting vulnerability, and it's very hard for the men who maybe need this most to be able to say, I need this at all. It's a really challenging topic. There is also the assumption in the culture, not incorrect assumption, by the way, that men are privileged. That's true. Men have been privileged from time immemorial. The problem right now is that women in every sphere of life it's not a problem, it's a celebration. We should be glad for this, that women have made so much progress that their progress is actually outstripping men in school. Women are performing better, graduating at higher rates. They're doing better in a lot of ways in the workplace than men. There's the jobs that are sort of being created in this economy tend to favor skill sets that women traditionally have over skill sets that men traditionally have, and we're seeing the results. There's a kind of malaise and helplessness, or maybe hopelessness is a better word, among some men. They're feeling shut out. They're feeling like they don't know where they belong. They're feeling unmoored. In a lot of cases, they're feeling attacked. In some cases, deservedly so. But it creates but it's hard to overcome that assumption that men are privileged. Where we have been underprivileged is in learning skill sets and becoming open to our sort of fuller humanity that will allow us to move forward in a world that is not going to be as receptive to the old ways. And there's very specific reasons for that. Brawn, for example, something that men always valued, is really in not very high demand right now, and it won't be. We associate that brawn with, plowing the fields and going to work at the factory and the slaughterhouse and these sort of masculine jobs that are gone and aren't coming back. The kind of emotional intelligence that women are naturally raised to possess, we see now is in high demand in the corporate environment, where it may not have been 10, 20 years ago. Men have to catch up to that. Men have to learn how to be empathetic. Men have to learn to understand other people's needs. A my way or the highway philosophy isn't as effective just from a purely economic point of view, just from a purely leadership point of view. If you want to be totally pragmatic about it, men have to learn these skills. And then just for their own happiness, for their own sense of well-being in the world, we have to learn these skills. We have to move forward. And because, men want to be better parents. They want to be better partners. We have to learn these skills. And I don't know that it will take the shape of a movement. In a certain respect, I hope it does, but I don't think it can be the kind of vocal feminist movement that we saw in the mid-'60s, because it would, at this point anyway in our culture, it would almost be absurd to see men marching in Washington for men's rights. That term itself has been corrupted, or it was born out of a kind of misogyny, men's rights. the same way white rights was born out of racism. So I don't know. I don't know what shape it takes, but I do think it's a bottom-up conversation, and I do think it's starting. And I don't even know that I would have said that a year ago that I think it's starting, but I do now start to sense. I'm sensing it.
And also, too, if the women are changing, then it affects men that they can't help but not change, that things aren't staying the same.
Well, we have to. I'm sorry, Kate. I know this is your event, and here I am just rambling on.
I'm enjoying
I'm
this.
mansplaining like a. Well, just think about it from a purely, again, a pragmatic point of view. Once women started entering the workforce, and women started earning their own salaries and having a kind of independence they didn't have before, they had agency over their own lives in ways that was not possible for them before. And as a result of that, they necessarily became more independent and therefore more demanding of the kind of relationship they wanted to have with their spouses. The nature of work has changed the nature of personal relationships. Those things are inevitable. Those things are good. Those things are healthy. That should happen. But yeah, as women change, men have to change. As men change, women will change. It is a constant. It's an endless conversation. And right now, the conversation has been stilted for one side.
Any other questions out there?
So first of all, Kate, your book is fantastic. I'm halfway through it. I'm hoping to finish it this weekend. My question pertains to education. So the way you describe these boys, the way they describe themselves and their strengths and their vulnerabilities, I want to know how this can come to the classroom level. I'm very interested in terms of like a gender differentiated instructional framework and really making sure the educators really understand who the audiences they have and really building on the strengths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've been kind of discussing a little bit. Somebody the other day was talking about doing a curriculum, and I think Nick's not here, is he? Nick, he's a teacher. He's was talking to me about just that. I think that there's a way to do. Yeah, I think getting it in the schools is really important because a lot of times, like, so I when I do my book tours, I go talk at schools. And my first book tour, I thought I was reiterating a point that they had heard at home hundreds of times, but that was not the case. And it was like, this was sometimes the first that girls had heard that their voices are important and that they should be who they're, allowed to be. And I think if they're not getting it home, then the next best place is at the schools. So I would love to see, like, I really basically want to do as much as I can with this message and get it to as many people as possible. And I feel like the book is a really good sort of like, it's like the Bible of what the ideas behind it. So as many ways as I can expand that message is kind of my goal.
Is there a message for boys that you've been giving to kids that you felt like, God, they must have been here, they must have heard this 100 times, but they hadn't?
Oh yeah, it's just those, boys will be boys, like hearing those things that they hear all the time, or even just the idea that there are so many expectations heaped on our shoulders of our boys, like that they need to be strong and they need to be leaders and they need to be athletic and that they can't be emotional, they can't cry. Just the fact that somebody's saying you don't have to listen to that is sort of eye-opening to some of these kids, which is sad. It's really sad in a way that you're thinking the same. I'm telling you something you've heard a bunch of times, but no, sometimes it's the first time people have heard it. Are you a teacher?
I'm an assistant principal in the South Bronx.
Okay.
And my passion is really supporting the boys, obviously the girls, but I don't want to go on and on, but I just feel that we need to do more to make our boys feel welcome and safe in the classroom. Mm-hmm. We just need to find ways to empower our boys and make sure their strengths are highlighted and that they feel supported in the classrooms.
Yeah, I agree.
Got one in the back.
Hi, Kate. How you doing? I love that you have gotten emails from readers, from parents, and from kids. Are you being chased after from tons of kids, like getting like tons of fan mail? Like, what's your fan mail like? Is it mostly from parents? Is it mostly from kids?
It's mostly actually from kids. This is from my mom's email. You know, they'll say this is but just like sharing their stories or from the boys, I've noticed it's the mom speaking on his behalf and the girls are speaking on their own behalf, which is interesting. And the other thing I noticed, like difference between the girls' process and the boys' process was getting the quotes from the girls was so easy because every picture accompanies a quote, but getting the quotes from the boys was like pulling teeth. It was just, and I wonder if that's just cultural, that they are not as accustomed to somebody asking them how they feel and what, so it was a long process. Like Megan can attest to that. We were like, she's like, where are the quotes? Where are the quotes? I was like, I don't know. I sent like 5 emails. We haven't gotten any. But I love hearing from girls and from the boys, like, because my kids, I don't even know if they've read the books, to be honest. So to see the kids have like ingested it and read it and memorize these girls' names and these boys' names and want to know what they're up to, and then also tell me about what they're doing. I love it. They're like the best kind of emails to get.
So we've got time for one last question. I think, did you have a repeat question?
You said in your Strongest and New Pretty book, women earn 79 cents for every dollar their male counterparts make. Has that changed yet?
Oh, I don't know the latest. Do you know this, Michael?
I don't know the very latest, but I think that number is pretty recent.
Yeah.
So I would say no, it hasn't changed yet.
No. When you start earning, let's hope, right?
Well, thank you all for your questions. Michael and Boyce, thank you for joining us as well. And Kate, thank you so much for being with us and for writing these books.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for having me,
Thank
Kate.
you.
Thanks, Boyce.
If you would like to get a copy of Part of the Boy signed or Strongest and Pretty, we have a couple copies available in the back. They'll be signing up at this table. We also have a couple copies of the journal. If you don't have those, I'm highly recommended, obviously. Thank you again so much for being with us. Thank you, Kate, Michael, and Boyce. Have a great night.
Thank you.